Okay, welcome back everyone to this very exciting symposium. We are now going to have the final panel, which will focus on universities. We have two talks in about 50 minutes, so hopefully we'll have lots of time for discussion. What we'll do is we'll have both papers concurrently, and then we'll have the discussion at the end. So we'll start off with Emanuelle Santos from the University of Birmingham. Oh, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Ruselle Meade from Cardiff University. I work in the School of Modern Languages there. And our first speaker is Emanuelle Santos from the University of Birmingham, and she will be talking on the topic of linguistics, area studies, and languages towards an alliance for a new thinking. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ruselle, Giuliana, and all the other colleagues joining us online today. It has been a fantastic afternoon of learning and reflections, and I would like to thank everybody for that. Really, everyone's presented before, everyone with questions. Thank you so very much. Well, I'd like to start by thanking the IMLR, especially my dearest Dr. Joseph Ford and, of course, Professor Charles Burdett for the opportunity to be here today. I would also like to say that I was supposed to be presenting today with my colleague at University of Birmingham, my colleague Dr. Alice Cole. But it was unfortunately no longer possible for her to join us today because since the event got rescheduled, she had then prior engagements, so she couldn't be here today. So while some of what I'm going to say today is predicated on my collaborative work with Alice, and Alice is a person from linguistics and from Romance linguistics specifically, the views that I'm bringing here today are mine alone. I'd also like to say that for the interest of time, I'm going to be reading something that I prepared, so I'm not going to elongate myself too much. And I do not have any beautiful, lovely slides, just like most of us had today. So just 10 minutes, it will be over soon. Okay? So much of what I'm going to say today are reflections that originate from my work here at the Department of Modern Languages at the University of Birmingham. And they are connected with my experiences as program lead for Portuguese studies and my recent appointment as departmental head of research this year. That said, while these reflections do not aim at dwelling at the REF 2021 results released yesterday, they are greatly related to opportunities that open themselves up in the aftermath of a particularly hard set of REF results for my department in 2014. These results triggered a major restructuring of how we do things in our department. And these changes are key in the ways in which we now feel much more confidence in how we address modern languages issues with inclusivity and representativity in the teaching and in research that we do and that we see and live as intrinsically connected. So while the particularly hard set of results that we had here in 2014 have triggered the predictable reviews in terms of research direction, academic appointments and investments that these things usually do, and which can be really, really hard and stuff. And here I'd like to open a parenthesis and just to formally congratulate all my colleagues here at the Department of Modern Languages at the University of Birmingham for their outstanding strength, collegiality, and openness to new ways of thinking that they showed throughout these processes. It has been incredibly hard and stuff, and people here that have done extremely well. So these bad REF results have also forced us to change the ways in which we worked at the methodological and subject level. In this sense, I think we moved in the same direction that the colleagues that have founded the IMLR, or AMBK, I think it's IMLR that you say, right? And we set ourselves the challenge to leave our methodological and disciplinary comfort zones and try to trespass barriers between language teaching, linguistics, area studies, and media. Despite having taken place both in terms of research and in teaching in their intrinsic synergy and relation, I'd like to talk specifically about how teaching has been important as a crucible for change when it comes to changing the ways in which we do inclusivity at my department. So that said, my use of the word inclusivity here is conscious, and it may sound quite unexpected if anyone joining us today has heard me speak about the colonial approaches to modern languages curricula in higher education, in UK higher education in the past 2 years. One of the things that I keep on repeating is that the ideas of decolonizing and the ideas of inclusivity are not the same thing. and that the idea of inclusivity, more often than not, interrupts the level of change one would need to achieve in order to even entertain the idea of decolonizing. I say that inclusion interrupts transformation because the idea of inclusion tends to co-opt differences' potential for changing our way to conceive the world by giving difference a place in a system structurally permeated by inequality. So it's basically reflect the place that this difference has in this unequal system without changing the system and giving it a better chance. This happens because inclusion, and by the same token representativity, do not presuppose equality, but tend to reflect at the level of the phenomenon or cultural artifact studied, the uneven space that difference occupies in that uneven system. That said, the trajectory that I see us taking here at the University of Birmingham is one that started at inclusivity and that has still the potential to, by the end, now what the end is going to be, God knows, where is the end point, right? But I think we have the potential that, to the end, to start entertaining an approximation or a connection with the decolonial approach. Again, the decolonial approach for me is not the same as decolonizing as a verb, and decolonizing as a verb usually used in the present continuous, and mostly that I never used in the simple past. I don't think decolonized is a thing, but that's my position as a researcher. So I think we can start entertaining an approximation with the decolonial way of seeing things. And this happened when we, in 2017, launched a new curriculum that envisaged giving away to a specific type of modern languages graduate, which was then called here internally the Birmingham Language Graduate. This was the name of the new curriculum. This new curriculum has given way to something that I like to call the Birmingham Method for Modern Languages, which is a method that blends language, content, and media by giving the languages in our department the challenge to organize themselves around at least 2 single large semester-long modules a year, where the language teaching, including competences such as speaking, listening, reading, and writing, and the critical content of that subject, they have to be aligned at the weekly level. Further to that, in order to build onto our staff strength, which is in a myriad of areas with quite a large department, each module would then have to be taught from scratch at the level of the type of activity to the level of contact hour, really, assessment and feedback. And it would have to be taught by large teams of colleagues, each with their own and at times conflicting set of disciplinary and critical values. This is key to how we do the Birmingham Method for Modern Languages, is putting people with different skills together doing this one thing. This has put, of course, together language tutors and lecturers in the most varied areas of linguistics, post-colonial studies, film, image, literary studies, medieval studies, history, and translation, to name but a few. Basically, when we put together one of our core modules, you have like a table and everyone is sitting on there with all these skills trying to put together how we're going to do that module for that semester. And teach language as we do all of this, talking about the same domain of things. And put all this together around the project that have been, and this putting together around this project has made them reconsider how we conceptualize the very idea of language to begin with. Because, and again, this is why, and my work with Alice Core is absolutely important, and I can recollect our first meeting together, and we're thinking of doing something together. When she thought about language, and specifically creoles and varieties, and she was talking about it from a syntactics perspective, from a Romance linguistics perspective, it absolutely went completely sideways when I was talking about it from a postcolonial perspective. And having to find a middle ground has been one of the privileges of my work in life here at Birmingham, and trying to understand and us frictioning, grilling each other and how to do better in order to really get to the bottom of things. So in practical terms, this has led us to deeply review the rather automated ways in which language teaching is traditionally done in a language class. This happened because bringing together a module where, say, the Portuguese language program is taught in conjunction with colleagues who work with the critical postulates of postcolonial studies, linguistics, gender and sexuality studies, decolonial studies, done like this, language teaching then embraces the nuances of language variation, prestige, symbolic value, gender violence, and civil rights, all of that while teaching them the verbo ser estar, right? This way, the ideas of right and wrong, they start to give way to ideas of coherent and incoherent in relation to a determinate variety registered or situation. The subject and object relationship in the analysis of cultural artifacts is questioned, and processes of linguistic invisibilization of difference and nuance gets interrupted by historicizations, right? We then embrace the project of teaching and assessing language with room for emerging ways of gendering languages, for example, mainly Romance languages that we're currently discussing at departmental level. So today in Portuguese, for example, one of the things that we're doing to our students, we're bringing forms that are found in the field about how using neutral language or gender neutral language, and we're bringing them into the class and we're giving students the opportunity to use them during their assessments, even though they haven't been officialized or by the Academia Brasileira de Letras or by the Academia de Ciências de Lisboa. We can take those gestures, and we're taking those gestures. This way, I argue that in our search here at the Modern Languages of Birmingham for a renewed approach to modern languages, the championed representativity and inclusivity as a way to form a language graduate in the global north who's capable of navigating the minefield of othering that working across cultures in an uneven world entails. The disciplinary and methodological boundaries that we have been seeking to transpose here at my department have given way to a much deeper transformation that can only be allowed via this type of multidisciplinary and multimodal alliances. In this sense, while I firmly believe that we're quite far off decolonizing anything, if that is even an actual possibility within systems and structures of UK higher education as we know them, our work here at Birmingham is definitely an example that through alliances, we can achieve a much more meaningful and hopefully transformative way of thinking and coexisting. And that's what I had for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions on the Birmingham model, as you call it. Thank you. Okay, our next speaker will be Juliana Borja. Just a reminder before we move on to Juliana that you can, if you have immediate questions, you can put them in the chat and we'll come to them after. So don't feel free to hold back. So Juliana will be speaking on decolonizing initiatives at the School of Modern Languages, Newcastle University. Thank you. I think you're on mute, Juliana, just so that you... Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the invitation to the organizers. I'm sorry that I'm going to be looking at the sky, but my computer stopped working yesterday, and I'm using my daughter's computer, and it has the camera in a very strange place. So anyway, I'm here. I'm going to give, I think, a shorter talk and a little bit more informal. I'm Juliana Borja. I'm a social anthropologist and a lecturer in Latin American Studies in the School of Modern Languages at Newcastle University. And I'm also the school decolonizing champion. And I will talk about this decolonizing initiative that we are undertaking in the school. I joined Newcastle in September last year, and when I joined, I was offered this new role of the decolonizing champion, which for me was and still is a challenge because I am critical to the decolonial concept, to its mobility from the universities of the North, let's say this, and its political economy. So for me, it was really and still being a constant questioning about that concept and this boom on the decolonial, because as all booms, it makes sometimes suspicious and questioning of how it's going to really last and embrace in all what we want to do. I'm also an affiliated lecturer in the Universidad Católica del Perú, where I have taught for more than 10 years, and in which I've been and still in conversation with Latin American colleagues. And I say this because I just want to point out that the decolonizing narrative is not necessarily central in many of the discussions of Latin American scholars in Latin American universities. Even the concept from Emanuelle, mainly forward by him and others, are from Latin American scholars who are working in US universities. And I've said this not because the battles to colonialism and exclusion are not part of the Latin American universities, not at all, but because they have other genealogies and longer genealogies. And I think this is very important to say, because we are talking about the construction as well of knowledge and colonialism. In the 1970s, Latin America produced a rich discussion on the coloniality, on the geopolitics of knowledge. And I'm more familiar with the social theory of art because I do anthropology of art. That discuss aspects of the colonial writings, that discuss questions about hegemonies of the West and Eurocentrism, and try to establish this dialogue South-South. For example, the La Habana was this. So there was already a very rich production in the 1970s, and there has been a lot of re-engineering of ideas flow, but sometimes without authors in them. So, but having said so, the coloniality is perhaps the vocabulary and the platform that is allowing today to rethink our practice, to rethink our school, to rethink our compositions in terms of people and diversity and our sections, and to rethink the forms of knowledge construction and teaching. So in that sense, I accept this role. So which initiatives are we having? Before I joined, in response to the events to students' claims to embrace a more diverse and decolonial university, Sarah Leahy, our EGI director, working with Michael Zhang and Catherine Hilbert, Michael had been before, organized a week of events on the topic, which included academic talks, films, and personal reflections on the question of exclusion and inclusion. For instance, there was one event on Brazil that was approached from a theoretical academic perspective, with a talk about post-racial Brazil society, a film about logging in Brazil made by the grandchild of one of the affected people, and a colleague of us talked about her personal experience. I mention this in detail because the colonizing practices needs to be embraced seriously, the multiplicity of formats and ways of knowledge production, as well as the importance of reflexivity in terms of our practices, our biographies, our experiences as subjects of exclusion and subjects with practices of excluding others. We need to ask ourselves what we are doing and what we are not doing, what we are imagining. Also, to talk about our scares, our challenges, our attitudes, our little gestures, and to come with honest responses. I would like to ask how we embracing dialogues, not only with a sense of equity, which is, of course, main and important, but also with empathy, and maybe, why not, with love. From the events in 2020, Michael Zhang and Catherine Hilbert created the blog Decolonising Modern Languages, that is what you're looking at. which activities continues. And for instance, you can find a post about decolonizing ourselves. And there are important reflections of our students too. So our focus this academic year has been on decolonizing the curriculum. And we wanted first to listen to each section and to listen among one another to share good practices, challenges, questions, fears in decolonizing the curriculum. So each head of section, in conversation with the lectors of other sections of their section, organized a presentation. And we also wanted to hear what the students have to say and propose for this agenda on decolonizing the curricula. So we organized 2 roundtables open for everybody. We provide a set of initial questions to motivate the discussion and help to identify power relations and the generation of changes. And I have to say that the discussion in both roundtables raised key reflection, and I just want to share 2 or 3 ideas with you. So the first one, with a head of section, the Latin American Studies section highlighted the need to be aware of the predicaments and challenges of using the concept of decoloniality. And I think this is important because of what I was mentioning as well in the beginning. Other aspect was about the importance that the modules approach and show different accents and the varieties of languages. For instance, Professor Guy Austin has a project on Algerian French, and he is trying to include films in our holdings and also courses with various forms of speaking French that not only shows the variety of French, but also the different perspectives from the directors and from the actors. Because talking about languages, as we know, is talking about peoples and groups. Other aspect was not thinking only in terms of nation states, or not even only about closed regions, but transnationally, even across regions. And I think this was mentioned before by Michael as well in the morning. So to look across sections, some of the questions were, how do we conceptualize Europe? How do we conceptualize Asia? How do we conceptualize Latin America? How do we imagine Europe should be thinking about cross-cultural modules, cross-school modules, no? And it was important, and it was pointed out the need to embrace the mobility of languages and people with a migration and hybridity. And in relation to this, what importance as well of the name of the School of Modern Languages. How does this link to our identity, to what we do, and to the debates and challenges in terms of modern, and also in terms only of languages? The student roundtable also picked in the question of the name and its notion of modernity in it, and pointed out something that perhaps we were missing, and it was very important. A nuance at something that sounds small, but is not small. They welcome that our courses included bibliography not only in English, but in that language that they were studying. They know that reading this were harder, but they really welcome it because they let them learn the language, but also notice other forms of debates, other forms of building arguments, other forms of knowledge construction. And I think this is very important that they get this sense through these other types of books. Students also welcome and want more that the modules engage with a variety of formats, not only books, not only films, but blogs, music, art. And this multisensorial dimension is key in decolonizing the curricula and knowledge, because it allows us to connect with other types of intellectuality. They want to hear more about different actors. For instance, they found fascinating when they could hear the videos of indigenous artists explaining about their work, their experience with these other forms of intellectuality, these other forms of accents, these other forms of histories and struggle, and engage with them perhaps in a more meaningful and empathic way. So among our initiatives have been to create a newsletter for each semester to communicate better across the school and also across the university, and constantly highlight the importance of this agenda. I want to mention that we have a decolonizing student lead who help us thinking about our activities and create this bridge with the community, with the students. So the plan for this year is, or for the next year, is to pass from discussion to implementation. Although it has been some implementation in the module, we want to trace this implementation. The plan is to discuss and act towards the name of the school, if that is what the community, SML community wants, and to include 5 different materials in each of our modules. Only 5, but these 5 is going to make a difference in including different formats of knowledge production, and also different authors coming from different backgrounds and groups, and embrace with different forms of intellectual production. Just to finish, I would like to conclude with this work of Bruce Rubio. He's an Amazonian artist, and his project is called Amazonizar. It is important because Bruce Rubio, this indigenous artist, has coined this concept of Amazonizar, and he defines this concept in his own words to make his culture prevail without another one consuming it, but at the same time recognizing the creativity of others, generating a new form of intercultural identity and world. And Bruce Rubio wants to Amazonizar cities, and he wants to Amazonizar institutions. And I think this is very important and powerful to listen and to grasp in these other forms of concepts and knowledges that are circulating and under other categories that are not necessarily the decolonial.
Well, thank you very much. We'll now open to questions. We've had 2 really fascinating papers. Feel free, as I said, to use the chat or to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you have. Did you have a question? I can see Charles momentarily unmuted himself, but there's a hand up. Chloe? Can I go to Chloe first?
Yeah. Hi. Thank you both for your presentation. It was very interesting. I have a question for Emanuelle Santos. I really like your approach. I think it's very bold and very needed. I'm struggling, however, to see how what does that look like from a student's point of view in their schedule? Because it sounds, and do tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like basically you have kind of, let's say, a year 1 language unit they would have most students take, and the year 1 content unit, kind of introductory to university, and they're kind of mixed, right? Which I guess for us would be like, I don't know, the equivalent of 5 or 6 hours a week for post A level, and more for beginners level or ab initio level. So how does that, for the students' point of view, what does their week look like, basically?
Yeah, thank you, Chloe, for this question. Exactly that. So, our students at Birmingham, they can do 2 or 3 languages degrees, and what it looks like is the following. We have something that we call Core 1, Core 2, Core 3, Core 4, Core 1, 2, 3, 4. Then when we come back from the year abroad, Core 5 is a research module that they do independent research. They do a mini dissertation preparing for the big dissertation towards the end of it. Then when they come back, they have Core 6 and 7. So what happens is at year 1, we have post A level. So we call it students doing a language at advanced level. We have advanced and ab initio. Portuguese is only taught at ab initio. For Portuguese, we have 1 module with 8 contact hours a week. This is called 1 module. And in this 1 module that is semester long, 8 contact hours a week, we have the critical content through a lecture, things have changed a lot with COVID, a seminar to discuss these things. We have hours destined for using language orally, listening, speaking, reading, writing, and hours to discuss grammar. So basically, and the people the students who are doing Portuguese and say French or Portuguese and German, for example, they will have then these modules that are worth 20 credits each. And then they will going to have to take more modules in that sense. So I have students, for example, doing 3 languages. So they're going to do 3 core ones. They're going to do core 1, Portuguese, Spanish, and German, right? They're going to do 6 hours for their post-A level core. They're going to do 8 hours for their Portuguese core. And that's it. They have 120 credits. They have like the 60 credits for that semester. Do you see what I mean? What is very difficult, though, is basically think through a module that is 10 to 12 weeks long, right? And have all of this stuff put together and all of this stuff involved in it, including with the language component. That makes it very difficult to use a language book, for example, which we don't use anymore. So colleagues go on and they take from pool of books, or more often than not, what happens, like in Portuguese, all of our language exercises are made from scratch because you don't really have that many language exercises to teach a certain level of Portuguese and to be discussing a 17th century text, right? So this is the kind of stuff that we deal with. That's how it looks like.
Okay, and also, and a follow-up question, if you don't mind. Then does that mean for second and final year that they still only have a core, and so they are they not allowed to take like different classes from different?
They have optional modules. So
they also have optional. Okay.
Yeah, what happens is if a student does 3 languages, they are going to have the course, how can I call it, ruling their lives in the first 1.5 years of the course. And then after that, the language modules, the components, the core modules that put together critical and language teaching, they shrink because they're supposed to be having more language skills. And they're going to do abroad. And once they come back, they're supposed to have a determined level. And then they can take many more optional modules. Those optional modules, they're fantastic. And I love them because there are optional modules that you can do in the target language. There are also optional modules that you can do in English, and they will be co-taught. For example, I teach this module called Languages and Power together with my colleague in Linguistics, where we look into, we both teach 1 hour a week. The module is like 2-hour seminars. I do 1 hour, Alice does 1 hour. We speak about the same topic. She's going to talk about the linguistic syntactic implications of something, and I'm going to talk about the relationship of power inequality or resistance and possibility that underlies that use of language, so to speak. For example, and then we have all sorts of colleagues contributing together in different modules. So you can never have done Russian, but you can do a departmental module where a colleague in Russian, German, Portuguese, we're all going to be talking about something that cuts across. That's what we call it, cross-departmental modules. So that there is that openness as well. Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Thank you both, Chloe and Emanuelle. Claire.
Hi, thanks both for your fantastic presentations. My question is for Giuliana. You spoke about having discussions with students considering the name of your school, so questioning modern languages and that they were critical of the kind of association with modernity of the term modern. I wondered whether you also discussed the term languages and particularly, you know, because you raised at the end of your presentation that the media that you look at include paintings, films, etc. And I just wondered if you had a discussion as well about whether the term languages could be limiting. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you for your question. We didn't approach the question about, or they didn't actually approach the question about languages, but more in relation of modernity and coloniality in the sense of the debates. But if it was not necessarily in answering or in embracing that questioning of the name of the school, they were the ones that were putting forward the need to look at these different repertoire when we talk for the School of Modern Languages, for the teaching and for they want to learn. So I think that even though it was not in a direct, because I'm the one to invent things, it was not in direct questioning of the name of the school, it was in their own reflections that needs to amplify the way of understanding the relationships, I would say, of the different languages and forms of communications that we have, that is language, text, film, art, the sensorial and all that. And they really point that out. And that's why when I was talking about that, I presented a painting of, I couldn't go through the painting that I was presented, but it's a painting of an indigenous artist that looks at all these different forms of knowing and communicating, and also not only the languages of people, but other forms of languages that come from other beings, if we want. So that what I want to say as well is the school is very related with these notions of the Anthropocene, and then the importance of bringing a concept of people, but of lands as well. So this thing of language, people, land is there in the discussion of our possible names if this goes forward, because as you saw as well in my PowerPoint, is well, this is what the whole community wants and how this clashes with other type of interests, more possibly market, more economic interest of the school. So we know all these things are gonna be in discussion.
Thank you. That sounds really exciting and fascinating.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Juliana about your role as a decolonizing champion, which sounds like a very interesting role. I just wanted to know more about where the impetus, the initiative for this, the creation of this role came from. And I also wanted to know more about the student response to some of the initiatives that you mentioned. You mentioned the decolonizing student leads, but beyond those students, what was the reception of the changes that you were making?
Yeah, well, the Decolonizing Champion is a new role that was started in our school in 2021. And it was a response of these claims of the students of the 2020, when I was mentioning what happened in the UK and this roundtable that happened there. And it's in conversation, and it's part of the EDI structure. And actually, Sara Liki is our EDI director is here. So not all the schools have a decolonizing champion. So some of the schools have embraced this role, which I think is also interesting, that the School of Modern Languages are at least activating this role. And not only that we had the possibility to call for a student decolonizing lead as well. So that the school give us the opportunity to do this. So that in relation to your question about how the students are engaged with what we are doing, I have to say that I think that COVID somehow has impacted in the way of communicating with students and trying to outreach and get their interest again in debates and in conversations with them. We have found very difficult to, we open a call for participation with the students because we wanted to make it not pointed out you are going to speak or you're going to speak. So we opened the call, and only 2 or 3 students will participate. And after some encouragement of saying you're good, you can do it. So I think that's one side. Another thing is that sometimes the students don't feel that this is a topic that they can talk about. So they can talk about maybe when they are in small groups, but when there is this public platform, because there are many things engaged in that. And I think that there is also something that if it's, for example, if it's a white student, why you're talking about Black history, and if you are indigenous. So there are all these issues there that students feel that what is the need, and the only ones that speak up are those having this very leadership role, which we know that they are gonna, but I don't think that we are having yet the communication with the students, and that this thing permeates as we would like this to permeate. And that's the role as well of our newsletters, of the Decolonizing Student Lead, and hope it gets there as part of our normal thinking and vocabulary.
Thank you very much. Sarah.
Thanks, Ruselle. And thanks, Juliana and Emanuelle as well. That's really fascinating to hear what's going on at Birmingham as well. I just wanted to really add to what Juliana was saying there about student engagement, because what we have found is that although people don't always come forward for specific events, there is a real interest expressed, for example, at student staff committee meetings, and also, you know, in terms of module choices and the kinds of modules people are choosing or sort of requesting. So I think there is a wider interest in this question and in these issues, and students are genuinely curious and you know, really keen to learn, and many students, you know, want to find a kind of a degree program that reflects their experiences of the world, that in a more in terms of kind of greater diversity. So, but it's from there to sort of having, you know, I think students who will come forward and put themselves forward and speak out in these fora, that I think there's a big step. So I'd be really interested in hearing about what happens elsewhere and whether you know, other people have different experiences.
Thank you. So yeah, if others as well who are involved in this work can perhaps speak on that, that'd be great. Emanuelle.
It is not about Sarah, what Sarah said. It's just, I was just like, I have a question to Giuliana.
Okay.
Giuliana, when you started your presentation, I really loved how you smashed the whole, you know, yeah, we're all here, Mignolo, this, Mignolo, that, but you know, it's not necessarily what people are thinking about in Latin America. So that's a version of that we get via Ivy League, so on and so forth. That's there for us to understand in English, but it's not really the engagement with the perspectives of these places. And you dig into the sociology that's been there for decades. It's wonderful. Loved it. The end. However, when you came into telling what kind of activities you end up doing, you are possible to do at Newcastle, it felt to me that they're rather traditional in the sense of how traditional activities are done in UK classrooms. So basically, you start proposing something really like, let's engage with how these people understand the world, how they organize knowledge. And then the kind of examples you brought were like, let's talk through how we understand this. It's still a separation. It felt like it doesn't meet the potential, the transformative potential of the stuff that you started talking to. I was like super excited. So I would like to ask you, what are the limits that you see, if you see any limits in that sense, that actually, you see what I mean, like the actual structural, real, material realities of teaching a modern languages degree in the UK, the way we have to, with all the assessments you have to, with the QOA, everything you have to do, and whether it actually interrupts really the transformative potential of that which you were proposing at the beginning of your talk. Because nobody goes on, people are like, oh yeah, I've read Mignolo, now I can decolonize the world. I'm like, really? Right? Like, it's so important. The very idea of reorganizing, that's an opening, that's a door. It's a door that's open, it's in English, it's there, it's available. Great, let's walk through that door. Let's lose ourselves. Let's find something else, right? And it seems like it's super difficult to embed this desire for being lost into the learning experience that we have to provide to our students by law, by all of those very, like things written. So if you could speak a little bit about your experience of that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Emanuelle. I would like to start saying that we did this roundtable because I think that it was important to raise the topic, so to ask questions. It was I would say that it was different in a way. It's still a presentation and all that. But what it was interesting is the raising questions and the possibility of being there or being, I have, in my module, in my section, we haven't been able to. And that possibility of not being able to do it or not knowing how to do it was part of what it was open in the roundtable at the beginning. And as you were saying, this thing about being lost. And I think I want to bring this possibility of messiness as well. We need to give in that class, and someone was asking something there in the questions, why the classes still have the same structure and the same, And I think that, we always part by the lecture, that teaches, and now of course, we have more participation of the students and all that. But this participation, because also the lecture has to be so clean and so neat. We are not given the chance of make a mistake, of silence, of being nervous, of being scared. And I think that is also why students are not participating as they want in this platform, because they feel that they have to it to be there. So I think, and that has to do with the way of we are creating and we are processing and our methodologies of knowledge as well. And I like that, and I want to just point it out. It's not an activity that I'm doing, but when I heard about this activity, a colleague of mine that is going to be about tango, but when he was saying that, I was thinking, well, this is amazing because it's approaching with this empathy and this connectedness again through dancing, through the dance, through being together. I was going to end it up one of the things that I said, mentioning the tango, but I didn't do it because I thought, oh, maybe too much. But I want to mention it right now because I was saying that we move little by little, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but together and in harmony, like a tango. So I would like to bring all these things more into the possibilities, to explore with art, to explore with music and all that. But that needs time, as you know, and also for me to be engaging more with the university I started last year. So to know the mechanisms and what is possible, what is not, and what to challenge and what's not. But yeah.
Thank you. Maybe I can, we have a little bit more time. I can throw it back to Emanuelle and maybe get your input on what you've brought up, the sort of like structural and institutional sort of barriers that stymie true
that's a nightmare. That's an absolute nightmare. That's an absolute nightmare. Because there's also one thing, we're talking a lot about, so there's the whole ways in which universities are set as institutions that have rules and we have regulatory bodies, right? And IMLR, help us change things together with the regulatory bodies so we can be more flexible, right? But we have all of these constraints that we have to abide by in order to have a license to work, right? And then within those constraints, we go and try to do something. So there's already a compromise in there. There's also the massive compromise on having, people's massive workloads, everything. What happened here in Birmingham, it's a specific part of a very, very bad moment, really, where people were pushed to their limit to do something. And I think we made an opportunity out of something, but that was awful. That was not an opportunity. That was really difficult on people. My view is that I think it's a game of push and pull, and I think the more of us who are sitting in those committees that we can do this, and we can try to do something about it. When it comes to student voice, I've been hearing a lot about, the student also wants that change. Not every student wants that change. I mean, I don't know, perhaps that's not your reality, but I was discussing that with my head of school. My head of school happens to be between modern languages and music. And O'Shea was saying, I'm going to tell you an example. It's not every student of music, for example, that would like to start their year one, not studying the classics that they came from school, thinking that's what the music to study at the university. So if they don't find that, they're not going to come through the door. And that's an important thing, and that's one of the reasons why I tried to join the work that Lisa does in that sense, to understand. But we can't just go on and try to blow people's minds and change everything at university level when the students perhaps do not recognize that as an asset starting with. And again, it's really important to say, oh yeah, but we do have the student of color. The student of color doesn't necessarily think that the game has to change. They may just think that they just need to win in the game. I'm a person of color. Being a Black person does not make you a revolutionary, right? And this is one of the stuff that we have to stop equating in a way. I also keep thinking we all like to ask students what they want to do every time. We don't know what we want to teach them, because I don't see anybody asking students if they want to learn the subjunctive, or whether that's necessary at all. And I find it's a massive flaw, the way in which we bring students' view and students' opinions into our conversations, because they're clearly not built into it, and we just pick and choose the times to bring them up in order to have an argument going in a direction or another. So I really think, Ruselle, that the idea is for us to be thinking what we do structurally with the ways in which university work to the extent in which we can, and we have to get the message across. I think one of the things that is really sad is because there's so many of us, we're so precarious in so many ways, that it keeps like, oh, we have to do that. I've done that. Look, I've done a little solution for this little problem. So keep me here, keep me around. And we keep on working in band-aids and patch up work, while what we need is redesign and rethinking of the model. But who can say? It's just people who have massive amounts of privilege within this systems that can say we can have an overall, and then it can say you're going to have an overall. Yeah, of course, let's further stretch and take advantage and exploit people in precarious contracts that do make most of the work. So do you see what I mean? It's if we do not talk about this institutional mismatch between what is the best thing to do and recognize the best thing to do and what universities are willing to pay for and what are willing to invest on, I don't really think that we can go somewhere without losing colleagues' mental health, and life around along the way, really.
Thank you. I don't think I can, we can have a more powerful ending and perhaps segue into Joseph's comments coming. But yes, that appeal for structural change and of course the help of UCML to help with this. So I'd like to thank Emanuelle and Giuliana. We all, and also to point you to some very interesting resources that Dustin Hosseini has put in the chat. So please do check those out. Those look really very useful. Look forward to reading them. So yeah, thanks once again. I'll now hand over to Joseph Ford, who's organized this wonderful symposium, to give us some conclusions and closing comments.
Thank you so much, Ruselle, and thank you, Giuliana and Emanuelle, for such wonderful talks. And yeah, and I think really challenging perspectives and embracing those as challenges that we all need to kind of reckon with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and give a very brief overview of what's been said, and I apologise in advance if I don't cover everything, but I think it might be interesting just for us to go over a little bit of what's been said throughout the day, and then after that, so I'll speak for a couple of minutes, and then after that I'll open the floor really for people to speak. And I think the main thing for us about this is to put some questions to you as a group, and thank you for staying, by the way, for this discussion, because I think it is important that, as Charles said before, that we come away with some action points for the Institute of Modern Languages Research and the way in which we can support this work and sustain this work and join up some of the initiatives that are going on. So I think, one of the things I wanted to start by saying, it really came across with Michael's talk this morning, was that, and certainly in many of the other talks as well, I think we are in many ways unique, in a unique position to do this work and to think about questions of inclusivity, while also having that kind of caveat in my mind that Emanuelle mentioned before about inclusivity being about kind of a co-opting move a lot of the time. I think we need to be very wary of that. But I think we are in languages, as languages scholars, as languages practitioners, as languages teachers, in a unique place to be doing this work. And so I think it is important that we convene sessions like this and we have these conversations. And I think that with that, casting back to my comment this morning about us being in listening mode, I think we've actually ourselves got a lot more to learn. And I think that's why it's so important that we come together on these occasions. I'm thinking, of Lisa's comments earlier on about, the place of teachers and researchers in exchange, but as learning about what we each do in a kind of reciprocal exchange. I think that's incredibly important. And certainly today has been a great example of that. So thank you, all of you, for what you've brought to today. I was also thinking about how I was thinking about that comment that Michael raised about the national, the regional, and the global, and seeing those things in comparative perspective. But it prompted me to think about, well, seeing those things in comparative perspective, but it's also about interrogating our own subjectivity in relation to the nation, the region, the globe, the regional and the global, and thinking about what are different positionalities and how we might decenter our different positionalities in relation to those concepts, and consider how these are also a set of very differently constituted historical concepts based upon where we are coming from. And again, of course, we are then, as languages scholars, uniquely placed to interrogate those constructs. And I think, Giuliana, you got to this point too in relation to thinking about the structure of modern languages, and yourself coming from anthropology, and then bringing that question of the tension between what is actually, what Mignolo is saying, what is actually experienced, and Emanuelle, you picked up on this point, what's actually experienced by ordinary people. And I think, again, there is a sense there, just to add on that point of breaking down the barriers between perhaps more elite culture and ordinary cultures. I think, languages, cultures, societies, it has a unique optic and set of methodologies to bring to breaking down those oppositions between the elite, perhaps the more elite or the cosmopolitan and vernacular, and kind of not seeing those two things so much as in opposition, and breaking those two kind of oppositions down. And I think our positionalities then are actually about, and our own subjectivity are actually about the history of our own disciplinary areas, and the question, I think, of the importance of knowing ourselves better. And this came across really with the AGS and Women in German Studies survey. And the real, they're so important because it is about knowing ourselves better. It's about knowing our history as a disciplinary area, and then deciding upon actions we can take to change things. And I think this is true for us as researchers, but also for those of us who teach in schools. And I think that came across so well in Lisa's presentation, the presentation that was given in the schools panel around the importance of the Association for Languages Learning Special Interest Group. I think it's so important for us to create those safe spaces whereby we get to know ourselves better, and whereby we get to ask difficult questions of ourselves, difficult questions of our colleagues, but also in that very kind of safe environment of respectful and reciprocal exchange. And then I think I was really struck what Claire said about the including our students in that definition, and getting back to this notion of breaking down the national in that definition of language community. So the community of language speakers is about the community of students who are learning with us. And I think that is very clear when we heard from, shadow heroes, from Gitanjali and shadow heroes, about the kind of communities they're engaging with, but also the new communities that they're forging through the work they do. Same goes for the Stephen Spender Trust and the Wales mentoring scheme. I think these are communities in formation. And again, Emanuelle, the Birmingham Method, I think, again, you are reconstituting an idea of language and forming a kind of a language community there in making those changes. And I was very struck again at how this comes out of the ref, this comes out of a painful process, it comes out of a history, right, and an examination of that history, and how can we do things better, and how can we create an opportunity out of actually what is quite a painful history. And that might also relate to histories of our discipline and histories of coloniality within our discipline as well, when we take a kind of longer view about where modern languages has come from. And I guess that takes me back again to this idea of the division, the false division between modern and community languages. I think we are all, it gives us a new idea of community and language, and it makes us see that in a different way. We are all forging communities through language. And we all of the languages and the language community, our students are part of this new idea, I think, of community languages, which is about something more, and creating something more kind of diverse, I suppose, in approach, and a lot more kind of a multiplicity within an idea of language. That we can then foster among our students. So I suppose I wanted to kind of open the conversation by going back to the idea of small steps that Eman mentioned before, and then Giuliana, you brought up again in relation to tango and dance, small steps, large steps. I think, how can we draw these small steps together? They are small steps into a space of continual exchange. How can the IMLR, as a space of exchange, a space of conversation, whether it's through more events like this, whether it's through a resource on our website, whether it's through rethinking the way we do something, our publications, for instance, we're very open to a discussion here. And part of us kind of relaunching ourselves and rethinking ourselves as an institute over this coming summer, as I mentioned before, is around listening to what are the needs for these groups, and in particular, how can we bring things together in a meaningful and a useful way. And that includes, I suppose, opportunities for seeking creative opportunities for funding, for example, for sustaining this work that's going on. There are endless ways we could collaborate, but I'm thinking, what are the first small steps that we can take in order to bring the threads of the really excellent work that we've been hearing about today together. So I'm going to stop there, and I don't know if, Charles, you have anything to add after that.
No, not at all. Absolutely, concur with everything that you said, Jane.
And really, thanks, Charles. I just wanted to open the floor really to people to speak freely. You can, there's quite a few of us in here, there's plenty of people, so you can raise your hand or post a question in the chat or comments in the chat, but really, please do feel free to contribute.
Just while people are waiting to respond, I mean, this does seem like an ideal moment for us to take this discussion forward in all that we do. We had the AMLUC meeting this morning with subject heads across modern languages, area studies, and linguistics. And there is a confluence of many things. Subject benchmarking is due to report. That's hugely significant in the area of languages, cultures, and societies. We have also the report by the AHRC Future of Language Research Fellows, who are going to be reporting on their submission to the AHRC as to where millions of pounds of future funding should be directed. We've got the legacy of OWRY. We've got how we're going to deal with the new GCSE in England. We've got the British Academy's language portal. We've got ongoing and very important discussions about the naming of modern languages and its connection with community languages. So this is a fundamentally important moment for us to be really thinking about what it is we're doing and how we're doing, what the role of the IMLR is within that. As Joe said, we're going to be spending the summer thinking about a strategically planned set of initiatives that will be reinforcing the work that we have been doing and the power to convene that we do have. And I think that what is emerging very strongly from today is the way in which you can't talk about a research initiative without talking about really getting down to the structural, both beyond a university, within a school, within a teaching environment. You can't do things in a piecemeal way. You really have to be thinking about how they come together and what you can do to change the structures, both of teaching and research and their infrastructure. And this was something that emerged very strongly from the final session, but I think it's true throughout. And absolutely, we have to really think about how we can align what's going on and talk much more between schools and between universities. And another thing that's emerging very strongly, you can't continue with this division between language teaching and so-called content teaching. It really doesn't work. But I think that the questions about inclusivity, participation, engagement are really the ground on which one can build a reformulated notion of the teaching and research within language, culture, and society that in our very diverse ways, we can bring together and really see ourselves involved in an ongoing and inclusive, wide-ranging, and above all, continuing conversation. So the moment is certainly a key moment.
Charles, if I could just further elaborate a little bit on what you said about we can't really continue this division between the language teaching and the content teaching, right? I have found that this is a real massive paradigm that keeps the things the way they are. For example, I do understand that there's a lot that I propose that comes because I am a content lecturer that teaches language, and I am also the native speaker. So basically, I'm the face and the body and the experience of the language tutor, because it does happen, right? We tend to employ native speakers with precarious contracts, without a PhD or without time to prepare proper stuff, without time for research, right? We tend to employ these people to do the language teaching, and we tend to give the lovely, nice contracts to people who are usually British, that come from certain parts of British academia to come and do the content teaching. And these people don't do one class of trying to teach a verb. They don't do one class of trying to put together all of the beautiful ideas about the world in a way in which is not harmful. It's not, it doesn't get compromised when you go then saying, that's how we speak it, that's not how you speak it, right? And one of the things that I find transformative myself with my colleagues is that here everyone has to teach language. Everybody. And then you get somebody with a massive background in gender and sexuality studies. They don't accept the fact that you can't express yourself, that you can't teach your students to speak with different ways of expressing their gender identities that are not, how can I call it, sanctioned by the Académie Française. They're not going to accept. And then we're going to have that conversation sitting down and everyone is going to be disagreeing. And that's incredibly rich, but that's only incredibly rich because that professor, that person is sitting down in that meeting and they're saying, I refuse to do that, right? Now, there are many privileges and many things that get broken, but I think this is one of the most important things. For example, in terms of Portuguese studies, We have now Tropo UK, I don't know if Ana Rimão is still there, which is fantastic, which is the Association of Teachers of Portuguese Language in the UK. Because as far as I'm concerned, they don't have space at ABEL, or the space that they always have at ABEL, which is our subject association, has always been small. Most of the people I see presenting at ABEL, they're not talking about language teaching, so they made their own association. They work in tandem, but they're still, like for me, I have to have two associations and go to these two places with two different identities. I think this is one of the aspects in which we can start change. And that doesn't cost a lot of much more money, but it does cost a lot of people leaving their comfort zones. And that's, but I just like to dwell on it, because there is also the problem of the native speaker paradigm, right? Once you're a native speaker, Charles, I've been speaking about my research in a billion places. More often than not, what I get is someone asking something about being a native speaker and something that has nothing to do with what I presented, because I speak with an accent. Because, you know, of course, my work, there are certain aspects of my conceptual work that don't filter through the conversation because I have the face of the quote unquote language tutor. So, and I say that not to victimize myself and etc. It's not about that. It's just to say that I understand what it feels like, and I really hope that we can work across it, because how is there going to be change? Do you see what I mean?
Well, just very quickly, I couldn't agree with you more. And this is something that we can do. It is very strong. It is, and yet, if you talk to someone outside of modern languages, the first thing that they will say, yes, it is about language. Yes, indeed, it is. And all of the stuff that we were talking about, creative translation, translation as a medium for doing really complex, necessary, important, located work about transculturality is not foregrounded when it should be the basis of a subject area. But I'll stop there. I see Claire's.
I just wanted to echo what Emanuelle was saying. I have observed that division in the UK. I worked in the US on and off for 8 years, and there the standard model is the ab initio model. And I think, you know, that seems like the way things are moving in the UK, which does mean, you know, that perhaps the so-called language teaching is by necessity, you know, being done by a broader range of staff, though not everyone. And yeah, there is a privileging still of the content, so-called content modules over language modules. But I don't know if this is perhaps I don't know if I could call it really a silver lining, but something which may be happening anyway in UK language departments because of the shift towards ab initio, is that more staff are going to have to be doing the language teaching. And that also means that training is necessary for those people to do that language teaching well. So that's what I wanted to say there. But originally I put my hand up just to say that from the survey that we've done, what struck me and my colleague, Professor Nick, is the significant number of people who are members of scholarly associations who are not employed in academia, and that scholarly associations have this kind of, they provide a space for people to stay connected to the discipline. And I guess I'm interested in whether others, I mean, we've done this survey, whether other scholarly associations are doing that too, and they've found this mix within their membership.
I would like to say something about this explorations of the School of Modern Languages and all that. I think that it's very important to think through and more this year abroad experience that students have, because I found it that for me, it was very powerful to read these posts, and it's not only a way of learning languages and culture, it is. But as an anthropologist, I found it like they were doing sort of this immersive experience, this field work. And I think that from the we can, like lecturers and people thinking about the School of Modern Languages, to try to, I don't know, I would say conceptualize, but yeah, conceptualize, or to bring forward this methodology, this experience, this way, in a in not just learn languages and culture or an immersive experience, to think through all what the year abroad gives to students and all the outcomes that come from there, and to students also to look at this amazing experience that they have. And they're writing already about that. Well, we have these reflexive posts in Newcastle University, which are fascinating. I can put it together with an introduction to a book of anthropology. Honestly, for me, it was one of the things that I like the most. And I think that there's more things to say and push forward through that year abroad experience with the students and with the thinking of the lecturers and students.
Thank you, Juliana. I was going to say, I'm not sure if anyone from the Wales mentoring group is still here, but I think not. But I guess the question there is, how do we mobilize and involve our students in the vision of what the future of the discipline can look like? I mean, it was mentioned before that obviously some students have a certain idea of what they want from a university education and a modern languages education. Others might have a more kind of in-placed and engaged experience that we might want to call upon to inform our practices. But yeah, I again, kind of conscious what Emanuelle mentioned before about the dangers of always saying that it's student-led, because I think ultimately we do have to have a vision for what is best for the student, right? I mean, I think in a sense, but like you say, I think that question as well reminds me of the question of anthropology, perhaps ethnography, this question of students on their year abroad being in place, using methods without necessarily realizing it, from disciplines of anthropology and ethnography, and modern languages or languages, cultures and societies being a kind of disciplinary area where these methods can be used but also decentered in a certain way. So there's an opportunity there for a kind of a languages education to be that space where we do that decentering, or where the student naturally, in a way, by just being in a different space, experiences those methods in a decentered way. But yeah, I'm conscious. I'm conscious. My colleague Naomi Wells has written about this. Actually, I can see Naomi's in the room, but I didn't want to. I didn't put the spotlight on you, but I think there was a great event on this a few years ago at the Institute of Modern Languages Research before the lockdowns, and we had some great discussions about the year abroad and what that produces, the kind of uniqueness of that for the discipline. Sorry, Naomi, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
It's all right. So I was listening with Bluetooth. I've just been listening in with Bluetooth headphones, kind of. I just want to say on that point, I think it really connects with what Emanuelle was saying about the native speaker paradigm, and that's like a kind of really knotty issue that underpins so much of how the practices in modern languages, and also a lot of the experiences on the year abroad connect to that, who's understood as a native speaker and what it means not to be understood or to be read as a native speaker, and how much that is also not about language but also about race, and how we don't voice that. And it is something where ethnography and that kind of reflection on positionality and what it is to occupy or not occupy that native speaker space. And there has been interesting work in EFL on that, the kind of native speaker paradigm in kind of English. But I think modern language is really, I mean, it could be to find a way of really bringing it out and having it embedded in terms of, what that paradigm does to what we do and how students understand what they're doing. I thought that could be a really interesting connection. And I think it's something we really need to bring out much more into the open as something I think all of us share different experiences and perspectives on.
I'm also conscious of the time as well. We have got to 4:30 rather quickly, but I don't know if anyone else wanted to chip in before we should probably bring things to a close. Michael.
Yeah, hi, sorry. Thank you, Joseph, and thank you everyone for the really thought-provoking session and discussion. I actually was just meaning to sort of say thank you to everybody, but I thought in terms of so by way of thank you, I just want to say also that I think some of the discussions that we've had in the discussion has really got me thinking about how. Actually, one of the things that I wish maybe in future we could talk a little bit more is how class might play a role in our discipline and also in our curriculum as well. And I have been also having these sort of reflections because I'm working out at Birmingham is as an evening university with a lot of our students being working adults or having started our BA programs, many of our students don't tend to get very stellar A-level results. So I'm actually very made aware of the attainment gaps of the students in this country as well. So one of the things that that struck me just now, Joe, when you're making the final discussion, something about privilege, something about A-lead, but also Emanuelle, what you're saying there about having these difficult discussions. Not every student might be interested in decolonizing, and indeed, I mean, if a student is really pressed for livelihood, and the reason they want to do a modern language degree is to become a language teacher and earn money and to make a living for themselves, to how can we sort of persuade them that issues and questions of inclusivity and decolonizing the curriculum and all of these initiatives are important to them as well. And likewise, Juliana, I mean, hi again, nice to see you. But also, in Newcastle, I know that they in the EDI committee and modern languages, they're doing the First Generation Scholars Network, which when I was there, they started it, and I thought it was really meaningful to talk about these issues of class as well. And so obviously, in terms of approaching a more slightly intersectional approach, having gender, having race, but also having class there in the mix as well, sort of bringing the discussion forward. I would love to learn more about, what different institutions and different colleagues are doing in terms of the sort of intersectional thinking. Sorry. So thank you very much, basically, for organizing this.
Thanks so much, Michael, and thank you for coming and for presenting and raising that really important point. It's something that we have been talking about among ourselves informally a lot, and I think it is one of those unspoken things that in modern languages we really need to be reckoning with. We really need to be reckoning with how class intersects with everything we've been talking about today. And I think that's a fantastic suggestion and an action point that we can certainly take forward.
I would love to learn more. Like I said, I've only been, I'm facing these issues right now every day in my student cohort. So I've been thinking about that, but thank you.
I think it would be great if we could get people together in a conversation about that. And I may come back to you, Michael, about that. If that's all right with you. Fantastic. well, with that, I mean, maybe that is a good point to kind of draw to a close today with at least one and many other ideas about how we can bring things together, and certainly one concrete idea for future discussion, panel, or event. But I just wanted to thank everyone for coming today, and in particular thank our speakers, our chairs, for their time and for their insight as well, and everyone obviously who came and listened and asked questions. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you everyone, and we will certainly be pursuing these ideas, really thinking about them and taking them forward, and I hope to see you again very soon. Thank you.